The sun had long disappeared beneath the horizon, leaving the Atlantic coast draped in a cloak of inky darkness. Waves lapped against the jagged rocks with a rhythmic, almost deliberate patience, whispering secrets only the sea could understand. The smell of salt and damp driftwood hung in the air, mixing with the faint, elusive scent of something older, something hidden. Visitors often spoke of the eerie calm that fell over the shore after sunset, as if the world itself held its breath. Locals, however, knew better. They said the ocean never truly slept, and at night it murmured of things that should remain forgotten. Amelia had always been drawn to the water. She wasn't from the coast. Her life had always been inland, in the safe, sun-drenched suburbs of Virginia. But when she inherited her grandfather's small, weather-beaten cabin by the sea, she felt a pull she could not resist. She arrived just as twilight settled, the sky a fading violet, the ocean a dark mirror reflecting the first tinted stars. The cabin smelled of aged wood and salt, the windows framing restless waves beyond. Amelia unpacked in silence, but the solitude didn't feel empty. It felt watched. As darkness deepened, she noticed the subtle creak of floorboards and the soft hiss of the wind outside. At first, it seemed normal for an old house, yet the sounds held an unnatural rhythm, almost like whispers sliding across the walls. Sitting by the fireplace, Amelia's thoughts drifted to the stories her grandfather had told her as a child. He had been a sailor once, or so he claimed, and he loved to speak of ghost ships, vessels that appeared out of nowhere, cloaked in fog, sailing silently with no living crew aboard. Children in town called him eccentric, but Amelia had always believed him. Tonight, in the dim firelight, she thought she might finally understand why. From the corner of her eye, she saw a shadow glide across the room, not belonging to the flickering flames. Her pulse quickened, but when she turned fully, there was nothing, just the dark, still interior of the cabin. A cold draft swept past her, carrying the faintest hint of salt and decay, and then she heard it, a low, melodic hum, distant yet unmistakable. Morning brought a heavy, gray fog that clung to the coastline like a living thing. Amelia ventured outside, wrapped in a thick coat, her boots crunching on damp sand. The ocean was muted, a vast expanse of gray shifting against the mist. Visibility was almost nothing, and the horizon seemed to vanish into a void. As she walked along the shoreline, she noticed the first traces of something unnatural. Broken pieces of driftwood were arranged in strange, deliberate patterns. She bent closer to inspect them and froze. One piece was carved with strange symbols, unfamiliar letters curling like seaweed. Her heartbeat quickened as the wind carried a faint, mournful sound, like the cry of a ship's bell far out at sea. Then, out of the fog, she saw it. A ship, faint and ghostly, gliding toward the shore. Its sails were tattered, the hull dark and slick, and yet it seemed impossibly real. Amelia blinked, but it didn't vanish. The ship moved silently, no sound of water against wood, just a slow, inevitable approach. She felt a chill seep into her bones. Drawn by a mix of fear and fascination, Amelia approached the water's edge. The ship floated closer, its outline sharper now, revealing rotting planks and rusted rigging swaying in a wind she couldn't feel. She strained to see a crew, but the deck was empty, utterly silent. Yet something was moving, shadows flickering at the edges of her vision. A whisper echoed across the waves, almost like a voice carried by the fog. "Amelia," it called, soft, coaxing, familiar. She froze, her breath catching. Her grandfather's name, long-buried memories of his tales, surged through her mind. The ship didn't feel hostile, but it wasn't benign either. It was waiting. Suddenly the fog thickened, swallowing the shoreline. The ship vanished, leaving only the sound of the waves and that lingering, haunting hum. Amelia stood alone, heart racing, wondering if what she had seen was real or a trick of the mist. She didn't know yet that it was only the beginning. The following days were marked by a peculiar stillness. The sun fought to pierce the heavy fog, casting a gray pallor over the coast. Amelia explored the nearby cliffs and abandoned docks, but every step she took seemed to echo unnaturally, as if the land itself remembered every footstep ever taken here. The locals were few, and their eyes always carried a shadow of fear. When she asked about the ghost ship, they glanced away, muttering about sailors lost to the sea and strange vessels appearing when the mist rolled in. Amelia sensed there were things left unspoken, stories so old that they were almost sacred. The town existed in quiet vigilance, wary of the tides and the whispering fog that sometimes crept inland, brushing doors and windows with icy fingers. Back at the cabin, strange occurrences grew more persistent. Objects shifted position overnight. A chair facing the fireplace would be moved to the window. A book left on the table would be open on a different page. Always subtle, always deliberate. And at night, the hum returned, just below the threshold of hearing, accompanied by soft knocks on the walls and the faint scent of brine. One morning, Amelia discovered something unusual on the sand. The tide had receded, leaving an intricate pattern of stones and shells, forming a spiral that seemed almost ritualistic. At the center lay a small bottle, corked and weathered. Inside, a piece of paper rolled tightly. With trembling hands, she unrolled it. The writing was faded but legible. "Do not follow the tides alone. The sea remembers the names of the lost." A chill ran down her spine. She turned to the waves, half expecting the ship to emerge from the fog, but the sea was calm, deceptive in its silence. That night, she dreamed of the vessel, sails torn, deck slick with mist, shadows moving beneath the timbers. A figure emerged, indistinct but somehow familiar, raising a hand in greeting. She woke with a start, heart pounding, unsure if it had been a dream or a memory implanted by the fog itself. Curiosity, and perhaps fear, drove Amelia to seek out an elderly neighbor, Mrs. Halloway, who had lived in the town all her life. The old woman's eyes were sharp, though her body frail, and when Amelia mentioned the ship, her gaze darkened. "They come for those who listen too closely," Mrs. Halloway whispered, her voice cracking like dried leaves. "Ghost ships aren't bound by time, child. They drift between the living and the lost. Some return what they find. Some take it." Amelia pressed for more, but the woman only shook her head. "Listen, watch, but don't touch. And whatever you do, don't call it by name." As she walked back through the mist-covered streets, Amelia felt the words weigh heavily upon her. She hadn't known she was being called. Or perhaps, in some strange way, she had always been. That evening, the fog rolled in thicker than ever. Amelia, drawn by an impulse she could not resist, ventured toward the shoreline. The world beyond the mist became muted and indistinct, the cliffs dissolving into shadows. And then it appeared. The ghost ship, closer than before, as if it had been waiting just for her. Its timbers creaked faintly, a sound not quite of this world, and the air was thick with brine and decay. Shadows danced along the deck and through the fog. Amelia thought she could make out faces, sorrowful, pleading, and at times accusatory. A soft voice, almost like the wind, whispered, "Amelia, come closer." She hesitated, every instinct screaming to retreat. But the pull was irresistible. As her boots sank into wet sand, she realized the tide had shifted in ways impossible to explain, guiding her toward the vessel. As she neared the ship, a plank extended toward the shore, as if inviting her aboard. Her hand trembled as she reached out to touch it. The moment her fingers brushed the wood, a vision struck her. Memories not her own, flashes of storms at sea, sailors calling out in fear, and a darkness that consumed everything. Amelia stumbled back, breath ragged, heart hammering. The ship hovered at the edge of the fog, silent now, waiting. She realized then that the ghost ship was not just a vessel. It was a keeper of memories, a bridge between worlds, and somehow it had chosen her. The wind whispered across the waves, carrying a single word she knew she would hear again. Remember. That night, Amelia could not sleep. The hum from the waves persisted, low and insistent, weaving into her dreams even as she tried to close her eyes. It was as though the sea itself was breathing, and in each exhale, voices whispered, sometimes pleading, sometimes warning. She lay awake, listening, half expecting the ghost ship to appear outside her window. By midnight, a soft tapping began on the cabin walls, rhythmic and deliberate. She held her breath, straining to understand. The sound was not random. It carried intention, like a code she could almost decipher. Tentatively, she pressed her hand against the wall. The tapping stopped, and then a single whisper drifted through the room. Follow. Amelia's pulse quickened. Fear fought with curiosity, and though every rational thought warned her to stay inside, she felt herself drawn toward the foggy shore once more. The fog had returned with unusual density, wrapping the coastline in a gray shroud. Amelia's boots sank into the wet sand as she walked, each step producing no sound, as if the beach itself had swallowed her presence. Out of the mist, the ship appeared again, larger now, its outline more distinct. The tattered sails shifted in a wind she could not feel, and the shadows on the deck were clearer. Figures moving with purpose, yet silent, as though trapped between worlds. Amelia realized that the faces were not strangers. They were sailors she had glimpsed in the visions, their eyes filled with stories of storms, shipwrecks, and endless nights at sea. A strange sense of calm settled over her. The ship was no longer simply a haunting. It was a vessel of history, a repository of lost memories calling out to be acknowledged. A rope ladder descended from the deck, swaying gently in the fog. Amelia hesitated at the water's edge. The sea was icy, and the mist thickened around her like a living thing. Still, some unseen force urged her forward. Every instinct screamed to retreat, yet her feet carried her closer. She reached the first rung and felt a tremor in the plank beneath her. A shadow brushed past, cold as the depths, and the hum rose in intensity. Whispered fragments of voices filled her mind. Remember, you are part of the story. The tides never forget. Amelia climbed slowly, every motion deliberate, until she set foot on the deck. The wood creaked under her weight, yet it felt solid, strangely alive, almost welcoming. The interior of the vessel was dimly lit by lanterns that burned with an ethereal glow. Shadows flickered along the walls, and the scent of salt, seaweed, and aged wood was overpowering. Amelia moved forward, drawn toward the center of the ship, where a spiral of driftwood and stones had been arranged, mirroring the pattern she had found on the shore. At the center lay an old, sea-stained journal. She picked it up, and as her fingers touched the cover, a flood of images assaulted her mind. Tempests tossing the ship, sailors huddled together against the storm, and the faces of those who had vanished without trace. Each memory was vivid, tangible, and overwhelming. A whisper drifted through the deck. Do not fear. Learn. Remember. The voices were no longer menacing. They were pleading, yearning to be understood. Amelia realized the ship was a guardian of lost souls, offering her glimpses of history in exchange for attention, acknowledgement, and memory. Suddenly, the lanterns flickered violently, casting the deck in deep shadows. The whispers grew frantic, overlapping in a cacophony of urgency. Amelia stumbled back, nearly losing her balance, as the fog outside thickened and surged over the railings like a tide of living gray. A cold gust swept past her, carrying a single distinct voice above the chaos. Do not linger. The sea claims what is given freely. The mist pulled back slightly, and the ship became a faint silhouette in the gray. Amelia descended to the shore, heart racing, mind spinning with the knowledge she had absorbed. She looked back once, and the ship had vanished entirely, leaving only the sound of waves whispering against the rocks. Though safe for the moment, she understood that her life had changed irrevocably. She had crossed a threshold, glimpsed the hidden depths of history, and awakened a curiosity that the sea itself had orchestrated. The whispers of the ghost ship lingered in her mind, promising return, guidance, and secrets yet untold. Amelia could no longer distinguish between waking and sleeping. Each night, the hum returned, wrapping around her like an unseen current. Dreams carried her across stormy seas, aboard the ghost ship she had glimpsed in the fog. Faces of lost sailors stared at her with longing, sometimes beckoning, sometimes warning. By day, the fog followed her inland, curling around trees and rooftops, creeping like liquid shadow. Locals avoided her eyes, whispering that the sea had claimed her attention, marking her as one of its own. Even the journal she had discovered on the ship seemed to pulse with memories, the ink shifting slightly when she looked away. It was alive with stories waiting to be remembered. One afternoon, Amelia discovered something impossible. The spiral pattern of stones and driftwood had appeared on the cabin's doorstep. She knelt to examine it, heart hammering, and found a single shell at the center, smooth and warm to the touch, despite the chill of the fog. Etched into its surface were symbols she had never seen, yet somehow understood. Warnings, guidance, names. The whispers returned, louder now, overlapping with the crashing waves. Remember, choose, follow, beware. Each word resonated with an authority she could not ignore. She understood that the ghost ship had chosen this moment, drawing her into a decision she could neither delay nor deny. That evening, Amelia returned to the shore. The tide had risen unusually fast, swallowing the sand and rocks, leaving only the mist-shrouded path before her. Out of the fog, the ship appeared once more, larger than ever, sails torn but gleaming with an otherworldly light. Shadows moved across the deck with purpose, beckoning her. A rope ladder descended, and the whispers swirled around her. Step aboard, or remain, forever waiting. Amelia's hands trembled as she reached for the first rung. Her mind raced with fear, wonder, and a strange anticipation. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet she could not resist the pull. The ship had become a living memory, a bridge between worlds, and she was ready, or as ready as anyone could ever be, to step across. As Amelia climbed aboard, the fog thickened, isolating her from the shore. The ship's deck was alive with whispers, lanterns glowing brighter than ever. The journal floated to her hands, pages flipping wildly as if alive. She read fragments of lost voyages, sailors' final thoughts, storms that had consumed entire crews, and the ship's own origin, a vessel born of tragedy, collecting memories, never aging, never dying. The shadows of sailors approached her, transparent but solid in intent. One figure reached out, its hand passing through hers like water, leaving a chill that sank into her bones. The hum rose to a crescendo, enveloping her senses, and then silence. She understood. The ship did not harm. It offered knowledge, a choice, and a responsibility. To remember was to honor those lost. To listen was to keep the stories alive. And yet, the sea demanded vigilance, for not all who followed its call returned unchanged. Amelia stepped back onto the shore just as dawn broke. The mist receded, revealing familiar cliffs, sand, and water. Yet something felt different. She glanced at the horizon. No sign of the ghost ship. Yet the whispers lingered in her mind, gentle, insistent. We are here, always, waiting. Back at the cabin, the spiral of stones and shells remained on her doorstep. The journal rested open, filled with new entries she had never written, memories that were now hers to carry. Amelia realized that she had become part of a continuum, a living witness to the tide's secrets. The ocean stretched before her, calm but restless, hiding untold stories beneath its surface. And somewhere in the fog, the ghost ship waited, patient, eternal, carrying memories yet to be revealed. Amelia knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning, and the tides would remember her, just as she would remember them.